Happy New Year to everybody, and glad to see everybody was able to make it to our meeting today. This is meeting number 19 of the Standing Committee on International Trade. Pursuant to the order of reference Thursday, December the 11th, Bill C-13, an act to implement the protocol on the accession of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland to the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. We have with us today, as I mentioned, the Honourable Maninder Sidhu, Minister of International Trade, and from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, Mary Catherine Spears, Director General, Trade Negotiations Bureau. Nice to see you again. Welcome all. I understand that the Minister is not going to take his usual 10 minutes that ministers do. He's going to do opening remarks of 5 minutes. So that will leave more time for questions from the committee members. So I will now open the floor to Minister Sidhu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bonjour à tous, everyone. It's so nice to be back here in the Trade Committee room where I spent a lot of time previous to my role as a Minister of International Trade, and I'm excited to be back here with many of you that do important work. I know this was one of my favorite committees because it was all about collaboration and getting good things done for Canadians. So thank you for having me here today as we speak to Bill C-13 and, of course, the future of Canada's trade relationship with the United Kingdom. Bill C-13 is about strengthening one of Canada's most enduring partnerships and taking it into the future. It brings the United Kingdom into the CPTPP as the first new member of this high-standard trading bloc. That matters because the UK is not just a trading partner, it's a strategic partner, an economic partner, and a long-standing ally of Canada. Our histories are deeply connected, our economies are complementary, and our people-to-people ties run very deep. And as global trade shifts, this relationship will only grow more important, not less. This agreement builds on the Canada-UK Free Trade Continuity Agreement, which preserved tariff-free access for Canadian exporters to a market of more than 67 million consumers. That matters. It matters for farmers, for manufacturers, for service providers, and for small businesses across the country that depend on stable, predictable access to global markets. But Bill C-13 is not about standing still, it's about moving forward. It positions Canada to modernize our trade rules, deepen our commercial ties with the UK, and ensure Canadian businesses, especially small and medium-sized enterprises, can compete and win in a rapidly changing global economy. And yes, even among close partners, trade relationships require constant work. We continue to address trade irritants with the UK directly, constructively, and with one goal in mind: fair treatment for Canadian workers, producers, and exporters. That's what serious trade policy looks like, and that's the standard this government holds. What gives me confidence is this: Canadians are ready, our businesses are innovative, our workers are world-class, and our products are trusted globally. And our government is focused on expanding Canada's trade horizons, deepening strong partnerships, and building new ones that reflect today's economic reality. Because this is not trade for trade's sake, this is trade that delivers. Trade that supports good jobs in every region across our country, trade that strengthens supply chains, trade that attracts investments, and trade that creates opportunity for the next generation of Canadian entrepreneurs. Trade that makes Canadians more resilient, more competitive, and more prosperous. And at the center of it all is about Canadian workers. Every agreement we negotiate, every barrier we remove, and every partnership we strengthen is done with workers in mind. Their success is Canada's success. Their resilience is Canada's resilience. And so Bill C-13 reflects a confident, outward-looking Canada, a country that understands the value of global engagement and the importance of strong, reliable partners like the United Kingdom. It reflects a government that is focused, that is optimistic, and determined to ensure Canadians can compete and win on the global stage. This is how we build Canada strong: by opening doors, by creating opportunities, and by making sure that the benefit of trade reaches workers, families, and communities across our vast country. Madam Chair, I'm very delighted to be here on short notice. As you know, we got the notice yesterday. We're here today. It's always exciting. I'm sure I'll be here many, many more times as we progress on many of our trade agreements, but I'm happy to take questions from members today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Sidhu. We will start with our committee questions. Mr. Mantle, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We too received short notice today, and this is not a new issue. This is something you've been dealing with for months, and I would suggest that if the government takes this matter seriously, it should provide parliamentarians with appropriate notice to prepare to consider your remarks and the remarks of officials, not 2 hours and 10 minutes in the morning on the second day back from our constituency break. You talked about trade delivering, preserving access, but by all accounts, Minister, the deal we are getting is worse than the deal we had. The Trade Continuity Agreement, which we previously had, in large part based on the provisions of the Canada-EU Trade Agreement, the CIIT, as you know, and until very recently, the stated objective of your government was to negotiate a standalone Canada-UK trade agreement to preserve those mutual benefits that we had under the CITA. But what you've brought before us is a worse deal. The TPP has comparatively higher tariff rates and slower tariff elimination. The TPP has less service and investment liberalization and more shallow regulatory cooperation. The TPP has less access for our agricultural products, has no dedicated provisions for veterinary, sanitary, and phytosanitary protocols, has less breadth and depth of access for local government procurement opportunities, has weaker pharmaceutical protections, and you said workers are top of your mind, while TPP has weaker labor protections than our previous deal. So simply holding on to what we had, which was your stated objective until recently, would have been a better deal. So my question to you is, how did you miss this opportunity to engage and redefine our trading relationship with the United Kingdom?
Madam Chair, through you, I'd like to thank the member for that important question. When we're talking about the CPTPP and what the quality of this agreement is, it's a trading bloc of roughly a dozen countries that represent 15% of the global economy. And if you look at since when the Government of Canada signed the CPTPP trade agreement since 2018, trade numbers have gone up and they've actually opened up more access for many industries. And I'll just give you some quick examples, Mr. Mantle. Malaysia has 25% growth since we signed into the CPTPP. If you look at the numbers in Japan, from $29 billion to $48 billion in 2023 alone, a 60% increase in two-way trade. And Vietnam, another important trading partner, an increase of roughly 110% growth. And so this is about creating opportunities. This is about opening doors for workers. And there's a reason why countries are lining up to join the CPTPP because of the high quality standards. And coming back to the UK, why is the UK important? It's our third largest trading partner, and we need to continue opening doors. Right now, currently with what we have right now with the UK, we have 99% tariff-free access. Of course, we're working hard to get to that 100% mark. I'm fighting hard for that 1%. But the CPTPP presents us an opportunity to have mechanisms in place, to have those conversations to get to full 100%. And so I think it's important to note, look at the numbers, look at the facts. You look at the countries lining up to join the CPTPP. We need to be there to support countries like our counterparts in the UK to join this important trade agreement.
Thank you, Minister. I mean, Vietnam and Indonesia have nothing to do with our access for the United Kingdom. So while I may agree with those positions, you've not answered my question. And in fact, you've not disagreed with any of the points I made that the deal that we are entering into is worse than the deal that we had. I have another question for you. It's on a different matter. It's on your recent trip overseas to China. This week is the anniversary. Tomorrow will be the one-year anniversary of the final report of the public inquiry into foreign interference, which identified China as our top foreign interference threat. In fact, in the election, of course, you'll remember it's been widely reported the Prime Minister considered China to be our greatest security threat. And just 8 months later, we are now entering into what you are calling a strategic partnership. Now, trade with China is necessary. A positive diplomatic relationship with China is necessary. But forging a new strategic partnership with China is a choice. Declaring that we are setting ourselves up for a new Chinese-led New World Order is a choice. Doing those things with great fanfare and media attention is a choice. So what I would suggest to you is that attempting to trade American unpredictability for Chinese dependence is not the answer to our problems. And I think Canadians are owed an explanation as to why, in such a short period, your government has moved from a position of considering China our greatest security threat to forging new strategic partnerships with a geopolitical adversary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I'd like to respond to the member in regarding his important question in terms of the U.S. and, of course, China. The U.S. will always be an important partner to Canada in terms of trade and other relationships. When you look at China, our second largest trading partner, it's important to engage at a time when our economic security is being threatened. The Joint Economic Trade Commission didn't sit for 8 years to work through many of the trade irritants that the canola growers have asked us to resolve, that the seafood industry has asked us to resolve, that the beef industry has come to us and say, please help us resolve these issues. And so this comes back to a conversation I had when I was newly appointed back in May in Paris with my counterpart from China, Minister Wang, to work towards reassessing and opening the JETSI, which is the Joint Economic Trade Commission, so we can work through many of these trade irritants. And so the trip to China was about resolving many of these irritants and get access to many of these industries. The canola industry alone supports 250,000 jobs. The beef industry is 350,000 jobs. You look at the seafood sector in Atlantic Canada, in West Coast, it's about 30,000 jobs. And so to me, at the end of the day, it's about the workers on the ground and making sure that we're giving access to those workers. And, that trip to China resulted in shipments getting out the door. You look at our first beef shipment in many years, it's now out the door. Canola shipments are now going out the door. And so this is what workers and stakeholders have asked us to do, and we're there. Of course, we're there with making sure that we're protecting Canadians, that there's security provisions in place, and those will remain there. We always make sure that we're standing up for Canadians, and we'll continue to do that, but we need to be eyes wide open, pragmatic about our approach. China, second largest trading partner, the U.S. first largest trading partner, and so we'll continue having those conversations.
Thank you very much. Madame Lapointe, please, for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente, et merci au
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Minister for being here today. Indeed, it's been short notice, so thank you for being here. Lastly, I spoke to C13 in the House, and Great Britain is one of our most important trade partners. I represent Rivière-des-Mille-Îles, north of Montreal, a riding which has a lot of innovation and industry, and the sector is expanding. We have several medium and small high-tech and manufacturing companies, and also aerospace. That's all very important in our area. Advanced engineering, mobility. You might know that the aerospace sector in Quebec represents 43,000 direct jobs and $20 billion in exports. In the lower Laurentides, we have Bombardier, Airbus, CAE, south in Saint-Hubert. You might not know this, but my son is an airline pilot, and he's training other pilots on CIE's flight simulators. It's very, very good training. CIE has branches elsewhere in the world. It provides customer service to airlines all over the place. Mr. Minister, can you tell us about your experience with regard to Montreal's aerospace sector?
My friend opposite, from my colleague on this trade committee for that very important question. I hope to respond to you one day in French. It's a work in progress, but yeah, you're right. Absolutely, the aerospace industry in Quebec is hugely important to the GDP, to the economy, to the workers there. Everywhere I travel to, Canadian innovation in aerospace is front and center. You mentioned CAE; they have many simulators around the world. The CAE alone is thousands of jobs in their ecosystem, not only in Quebec but across Canada. You talk about Bombardier. This recently expanded into another space in Quebec to create more aircraft products. And if you look at the UK, if you look at the top exports to the UK, aerospace is one of those in the top 5. And so there's many opportunities we have in the aerospace industry. Canada is known for that. In Quebec, but beyond Quebec. If you look at de Havilland in Calgary, what they're doing to create the water bombers, those are world-renowned, and so these are conversations that we're having everywhere I go. I was just recently in the Middle East, where we had a vast conversation on aerospace, on what more we can do in terms of training and simulation, and so we are very proud, and everywhere I go, it's about Canadian workers. We have the most educated workforce in the world, including many in Quebec, and so it's something that we should be proud of. It's being there to pitch Canada as a reliable, stable trading partner. And so, aerospace plays a key role, but there's many other sectors that feed into that. You know, you mentioned Pratt & Whitney, Bell Helicopters. These are many conversations that support thousands of jobs that we need to continue pushing forward to. And in the UK, if you look at their imports and you look at our exports to the UK, aerospace is in the top 5. And so it's about collaborating. It's about making sure that our workers are representative. And, you know, when you look at trade agreements and what they mean for people, at the end of the day, Linda, as you know, it's about opening opportunities. You've been on this trade committee for many, many years, even before I got here. And so I want to say thank you for your work as we continue to engage and open up areas of opportunity for your workers in Quebec.
Tantôt, vous avez parlé que nos produits sont très...
A little earlier, you said that
Products are trusted. Et c'est un des produits qu'on a en anglais.
so world-class products, be it goods or services, both are at a world-class level. So I'm wondering, through this Trans-Pacific partnership with the UK, how can we put the Canadian brand down even in a way that's even more impactful so we can sell even more of our goods and services through all of our trade agreements, of which there are many. So how can we increase the profile of Brand Canada?
To encourage businesses to look outwards. And, you know, I spent 13 years in the private sector prior to politics in international trade facilitation. And back then, many businesses were not ready to look overseas, you know, the shipping costs, don't understand the language, packaging requirements, et cetera, et cetera. And so now businesses are more open to that conversation, especially with trade policy from our southern neighbor. And so we need to be able to do some hand-holding and encourage businesses to get out into these new overseas markets. And so what are we doing as a government? If you look at Budget 2025, the trade ecosystem that we're creating through the SME Export Readiness Program that's being led by our Minister of Industry. You have the Can Export Program that's going to be able to provide some grants and assistance to get our businesses, our world-class products on the global stage at trade shows. And once they have orders ready, we want to make sure that there's some credit facilitation tools there through EDC. And so enabling $25 billion or more capital to more credit financing to help them get out to new markets. And so I think this is very important when you look at the ecosystem. There are many businesses that don't know how to export yet, so we want to make sure we get them there. Once they're ready to get there, we want to make sure that we're able to get them to trade shows around the world through Can Export. And of course, once they get their first order, it's about financing that first order. And so this ecosystem is being created. But we're at an opportune time where the world is looking at Canada as a reliable, stable trading partner, and we need to be able to promote Canadian goods. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Monsieur Savard-Tremblay for 6 minutes, please.
Oui, merci, monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. At the time, when you were sitting across from me, I called you Manny, but today you're Mr. Minister. We'll be on more casual, more friendly terms in private. But thank you very much. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the committee, and Happy New Year. And Happy New Year to all of my colleagues. In Quebec, there's a debate as to until when you can wish someone a Happy New Year, but I think we can still do it today. So first of all, the protocol was tabled September 28, 2025, and the bill, C-13, was tabled 15 days after 15 sitting days. But after a policy which is non-binding on bills, normally it's 21 days. So this is a public policy. You can look it up. So you can find it in 10 seconds on Google. And you can find it on the website of the Canadian website. So why didn't you respect this policy of the Canadian government when it comes to C-13?
Very Happy New Year to my colleague and friend. Of course, there's important work that you do on this committee, so thank you for everything you're doing. In terms of your question, if you look at the state that we're in right now, our economy, 2/3 of our economy is powered by international trade. And so if you look at the policies being created by our neighbor to the south, it's directly hitting our economic security. And so when the Prime Minister says we're in a crisis, we need to move fast, here's why we're moving fast. Here's why I'm here within a day's notice to make sure that we're moving forward on many of these agreements to create opportunities. And so I think we need to keep that in mind as we move forward, that we're not in normal times anymore. Our number one trading partner is creating some trade policies that are directly impacting workers on the ground. And so respectfully, I think it's important we look at the context that we're in. We want to continue engaging with stakeholders, and we're doing that, whether it's through my ministry and whether it's through many of the colleagues here on this trade committee with witnesses coming to committee. But we need to move fast, be able to open doors for Canadian businesses, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Donc, ce 6 jours-là aurait tout... je vais vous laisser mettre votre...
Okay. So if we decided to extend the study by a week, you would argue that we're radically changing the situation because it would be a marked departure from normal policy. So I don't quite understand your answer.
Back to my answer, it's about the current situation that we're in. When you look at how trade impacts communities across Canada, whether it's in Quebec or whether it's in Ontario, there's huge impacts of trade policies created by our neighbor to the south that we need to be able to diversify as fast as possible. This is something we've promised Canadians during our election mandate, that trade diversification will be top of our priorities to open new doors, especially when we're impacted by so many things that we cannot control from other governments. What we control is how fast we open doors, of how fast we move in Parliament, of how fast we're able to get workers more opportunities so they can export their goods to other countries around the world. And so if you look at, 1 in 5 jobs here in Canada are directly or indirectly impacted by trade. 2/3 of our economy powered by trade. We need to continue opening doors. This is what workers on the ground are
Monsieur le
telling us.
ministre, sur le fond, je pense qu'on est d'accord. L'enjeu n'est pas là. On est d'accord
I
avec
think we agree on the substance. We agree with diversification. At the end of the day, it doesn't change anything because the UK will be part of it. We're just making it official. But why not have respected the policy in question? And do you have a call to action for us today? If you think the 6 days would change anything, do you think that there are any deadlines this committee should apply with regard to the study of this bill?
Is well respected and well recognized. If you look at the meetings that you've had, I've sat on the other side of this table, meeting with witnesses, talking about trade, and so we need to continue engaging with stakeholders. So it's not to say we don't want to engage stakeholders. We need to continue engaging stakeholders, but I think stakeholders understand we're in a complex time right now. We have other trade agreements that we've completed in terms of Indonesia, which is next up in line, and I've introduced it in the House of Commons last month. We hope to move fast with that because that's another fast-growing market. It's destined to be the 5th largest economy in the world. After that, we hope to get to Ecuador, the UAE investment agreement. There's many other things that we need to continue moving forward on and opening doors. Historically, 15 trade agreements with 51 countries, but Canadians expect us to open more markets, and that's exactly what we're focused on.
Mais là, si on vous disait, nous, comme parlementaires, comme élus, comme
We as
députés,
parliamentarians elected by the people to represent certain values and interests, how much time do you think we should spend on studying C13? Do you think that would change anything to how quickly trade accelerates?
I don't know about time frames, but when you look at stakeholders and engagement and what stakeholders have said about this process, what they have said about access to the UK, we've heard a lot of positive things about having access. And so it depends on stakeholders. Have we listened to stakeholders? I certainly think so. And if there's someone that I need to talk to, I'm always happy to have that conversation.
mais vous dites, vous n'avez pas d'échange.
You say you don't have a specific timeline in mind. The 6 days gap between the policy and what the committee has decided, what about that?
Like I said, the context that we're in, we need to move fast, we need to open doors, and I think Canadians recognize that and they appreciate that.
Mr. McKenzie, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Minister, you indicated the Canadian beef industry has something in the neighborhood of 350,000 employees or jobs in that industry. The figures I have available to me indicate that Canada exported $85,000 worth of beef to the UK in 2023, $25,000 worth of beef in 2024, and had no beef exports in 2025. Now, those amounts of revenue wouldn't pay the gas for the Prime Minister's jet to go and visit his friend in the UK. What I'd like to know from you, sir, is whether specific industry barriers, non-tariff barriers with the UK, preventing our beef exports to that country were discussed in the course of the support that Canada is offering to the UK accession to the CPTPP?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for through you to the member for that question. I mean, if you talk about the beef industry, and I've met with the Cattle Association more than once, and I think the conversation with them is continue to open doors for us so we can get our exports out. And I said, well, how quick can you get your exports out? And they said, well, there's a supply-demand issue. We need to get our cattle up there. We don't have enough cattle. Maybe within the next 24 months, we'll be able to have enough cattle to get to these new markets that you're opening up, but we do appreciate what you're doing. Of course, with the UK, there's considerations around carcass wash and you know, hormone-free issues, which I've been on, and we need to continue having those conversations. But if you look at the CPTPP in terms of what it's done in terms of merchandise trade, if you look at what it's done for Canadian beef, just some numbers I think for people watching on the screen is Canadian beef exports to the CPTPP's largest economy, Japan, increased 5 years to more than $361 million.
Right.
So
I'm going to
18%
interrupt
increase.
there, just because we're talking about the UK today.
Yep.
I want to know if there have been specific discussions about those very barriers that you mentioned.
There have.
It's the carcass wash, it's a non-tariff barrier, also the growth promotants that are used in Canadian cattle industry. Both of those processes are widely accepted internationally, but the UK holds them up to prevent our products from being exported there. And, sir, I come from Western Canada, and there's a hell of a lot of cattle out there. So, with respect, sir, I don't think that market supply in our ability to export is a serious issue. But please, tell me about the barriers.
I mean, the Canadian Cattle Association, I'm a Western, I was born in Calgary, and this is something that they've said to me directly in terms of supply and demand, and you're seeing that on the impact of beef prices in our grocery stores because of supply and demand. And if you look at it historically, what's happened in that industry, this is something that they clearly explained to me. But I mean, coming back to the question on the UK, I've had many counterparts I've had many discussions with my counterpart, even last night, on many of these issues of, you know, whether it's pensions, whether it's beef, and we've continued to have those conversations, and so I'll be very open on that. Of course, right now, as I said to your colleague, 99% access. But what the CPTPP allows us to do is there's now mechanisms once they're ratified into the CPTPP, there's mechanisms to discuss non-tariff barriers. And so coming back to how we can facilitate discussions, the CPTPP will have further access to having those conversations in terms of discussing non-tariff barriers and hopefully resolving beef access. But currently, as it stands, my conversations with the cattle farmers, with the Cattle Association is around what are you doing with Indonesia? What are you doing in some of the other markets? Of course, the UK is important. Please continue to work on that. But our supply won't meet that demand until the next 24 months, so please keep that in mind.
You'll know, of course, Minister, that the Canadian Cattle Association has called on the Government of Canada to not support this accession. So clearly there are bigger issues there. It's not simply a question of supply, and they don't seem to be happy with other benefits being gained. But I'd like to know if the Government of Canada will commit to using dispute resolution for these non-tariff barrier issues with the UK. This is not a new issue, as I'm sure the Minister is aware that it's been outstanding now for years.
Yeah, I mean, look, when it comes back to what we want to do next in terms of the energy is there to continue having those conversations. You know, beef and cheese go hand in hand, right? I mean, they want access, you know, to our dairy market. We want our beef over there. That's a conversation we'll continue to have. It's not one against the other, but again, having those active conversations, and we'll continue to have those conversations. I stayed engaged with the beef industry. You know, Western Canada, it matters to farmers over there. It matters to me as a trade minister, but also as a Calgarian, and I'll continue to work on that.
So, Minister, you're really suggesting that we're being punished by the UK, similar to the manner in which China was punishing Canada with canola tariffs.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say we're being punished. If you look at trade numbers since 2016, our trade growth is over 50%. And so we're opening doors. Exporters are benefiting from our agreement with the UK. And so we'll continue making sure that we're having those conversations. Look, with your neighbor, you'll always have differences. And we'll need to continue talking about that to work out the differences. And so right now, like I said, 99% access. We're hoping to get to 100%. I'll work hard on that 1%.
Minister,
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Mr. McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Fonseca, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Minister Sidhu. I learned something new here today from MP McKenzie that you're from Calgary originally, and I always know you as a Bramptonian, you know, from our region of Peel. And I want to hone in on our region of Peel. You know, in Mississauga, we have over 75 Fortune 500 companies. But more than that, we have 50,000 businesses in Mississauga. You know, we talk about the diversity of our people that are in Peel region and Mississauga, but it's also the diversity of our businesses. So everything from, you know, manufacturing, life sciences, agriculture. You know, you wouldn't think that from Mississauga, but we are quite a diverse business community. I know that in your previous life in the private sector, you did a lot of work with those businesses in our region, and many of them for a long time just thought regionally, locally, in terms of the business that they do. But more so than ever before, I hear that they've got to diversify, they've got to trade. They're looking to not just the United States, of course, as our major market and number one trading partner, but right around the world, and also with the UK. I know that a number of our businesses, I'll give you one example of a large business, AstraZeneca, which is a UK-based headquarters, but then has their Canadian headquarters in Mississauga, East Cooksville, my riding, just the work that could be done there and their whole supply chain in terms of what that means for Canadians. Also, in our early discussion that we heard here at committee is that, you know, about trade, what I'm hearing from my constituents and businesses is the urgency to get on with this, to move quickly, to move at speed and at scale, to be able to help them be able to compete and to capitalize on these agreements like the CPTPP and the accession of the UK to the CPTPP. So I know that's a lot, Minister, that I've put out there for you, but take it as you will, and if you could speak to the businesses in my riding, in my city of Mississauga, to how you can help.
Absolutely. Listen, thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the member opposite, my friend Peter. Of course, in our neck of the woods in Peel region, Brampton, Mississauga, we have a lot of businesses that export in various different industries. One business that comes to mind is MDA Aerospace. They're right on the border of Brampton, Mississauga, that support thousands of jobs. It's something that we should be very proud of. And they've been on many delegations with me to many countries around the world. They're recognized from the partnerships that we're forming. If you look at the defense industry and the investments that our government is making, record levels, we haven't invested this much since the 1950s. And so it's huge. And there's huge potential there. The Prime Minister, during the election period and even after, has repeatedly said that we need to continue to increase industry capacity in the defense sector. And, you know, 75 cents of every dollar we spent traditionally went outside the country in terms of procurement. But we need to continue bringing our industries here, building up our industries, and that's the focus. And MDA is seen as a champion. You're seeing what they're doing in Quebec by producing satellites there, what they're doing in Brampton with their world-class engineering, and those are the businesses that we need to continue pushing forward. BlackBerry is another one that comes to mind, and so we need to continue supporting our defense industry, our aerospace industries, in many of those growth potentials. But if you talk about pharmaceuticals, you mentioned AstraZeneca. I remember their grand opening not too long ago in Mississauga, expanding their office. But there's a lot of areas of opportunity in pharma with the UK. And I'll give you some examples that I have here from the fantastic Trade Commissioner services in terms of what more are we doing. And so if you look at in Cambridge, UK, AstraZeneca has signed an agreement with EM Health to pilot and share R&D technology with the UK. And so that's another area of opportunity. If you look at some of the top 5 imports and exports, imports into our country, pharmaceutical is one of them. From the UK. And so there's plenty of ways we can collaborate with a like-minded country like the UK. There's another company out in Alberta. It's a medical-based technology company. They signed a partnership agreement with a UK-based firm, Golden Helix Foundation, on technology in the pharmaceuticals field of things. And so coming back to Brampton, coming back to Mississauga, there's a lot of conversations around agri-food and what opportunities are there, and because they support thousands of jobs. And so when I look at my trade delegations, you look at what markets you're going to, where you can have the biggest impact. And in the UK, it's definitely pharma, it's definitely aerospace, it's definitely defense, and many of the other industries. The UK just held a a show back in September, and we had close to 150 defense companies go out there from Canada to pitch their wares. And so there's a lot of opportunities in the UK, but also in the European Union. If you look at the European SAFE agreement that Canada signed into, Canada is the only non-EU partner welcomed into that procurement opportunities. You look at the NATO spending targets, and as they go up, this is huge potential for Canadian defense industries to have market access, to have procurement opportunities in that fast-growing region, whether it's in the UK, whether it's in the European Union, and we need to continue opening those doors.
Thank you very much. Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 2.5 minutes, please.
Rebonjour.
Well, hello again. Now, is it accurate to say that this protocol will reactivate the investor-state dispute mechanism?
I think when you look at, you mentioned investors, and I think it's important that investors, when they're investing, they need confidence, they need stability and reliability. And so when you look at many of the things we've signed around investment agreements, we're looking to attract $500 billion into Canada to build the major projects. And so you need to present certainty to investors that want to invest into Canada. And so there are a lot of people knocking on our doors. Just today, I have a South Korean delegation that's here from multiple industries looking to invest in Canada. And so these dispute resolutions that you talk about present a great opportunity to showcase certainty, to showcase reliability as investors pour billions of dollars into our economy. We need to make sure that they feel secure, that their investments are protected.
Vous avez des preuves? Parce que là, je les ai pas sous les...
Do you have any evidence of this? I heard that there would be no impact on investor confidence because NAFTA made these dispute resolution mechanisms popular because if investors felt that they were not being treated justly, they could go before a trade tribunal. And but under NAFTA, it was state against state. But now we're dealing with multinationals, which are almost like sovereign entities, which have to face off against states. Doesn't this worry you?
Canada has a opportunity in the window that we need to continue pushing on, bringing investors to Canada. If you look at what other countries are doing, trying to build up infrastructure, and they don't have investment protection mechanisms. They don't have that. They won't attract the infrastructure dollars to build. And so, I can give you some prime examples. I don't want to point any countries out right now on publicly, but we can have a conversation afterwards. But I think it's important to note that countries that do have investment protection mechanisms will be able to attract more investments. From my conversations, why won't Canadian firms, present proposals to me? Why won't they help me build up my bridges and this? And so I say, well, have you looked at the investment agreements that you have? Have you looked at what your country has done in the past by overtaking some of the assets that Canadian companies own? You need to look at historically what we're doing and the certainty that we need to present, and that's what Canada will continue to present.
I'm sorry.
Il me reste quelques secondes.
No other time. No.
Non? Prochain tour.
Mr. Grillo.
Bonjour, Madame la Présidente.
Well, good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair, Mr. Minister. Hello. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your time with us. I come from a rural farming area in the Beauce area of Quebec. In the past, we've been very disappointed with our agreement with the UK, especially with regard to farming and beef and tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers. And so in the past, again, we were very disappointed. Now, with regard to this trade deal, the CPTPP, what are you going to do to fix those failures of the past?
Question, Madam Chair, through you, responding to the member. When you talk about conversations that we're going to continue to have, as I said, I'll continue to engage with my counterpart from the UK to talk about beef access, to talk about more access for our farmers as we get more goods out the door. It's vitally important to me, and this is why I've met with many of the farming associations, including the Cattle Farmers Association, to talk about what more we can do. And so in the UK, we'll continue having those conversations. But if you look at what we're doing in Indonesia, presenting a huge market of opportunity, if you look at what we just did in China, our beef is now at the door to a huge market, in fact, one of the fastest growing markets in the world. These are big wins. So I'll continue to focus on that 1% access, tariff-free access into the UK. We have have access 99% right now of tariff-free access for many of our goods. But of course, my goal is to get to the 100%, and I remain committed to that.
Merci. La base d'une entente.
Thank you very much. The basis for an agreement is that it has to be a win-win, so a win for each party. With regard to beef imports in 2024, 42 million and 25,000 were exported from Canada. In 2025, January to July, 28 million were imported, 0 exported. You talk of a win-win agreement, but that wasn't the case. Same with pork. A little earlier, you said that beef was not at capacity, but pork has. We could sell hundreds of millions for hundreds of millions. For how much did we export in pork to the UK last year?
Overall picture of our beef and pork exports overall, and in 2024 alone it was over $10 billion. I know you're speaking about 10, 20, $30 million, but if you look at the bigger picture and what we're doing for our farmers, it's huge. The potential is huge. It's over $10 billion, and first and foremost, if you look at the agreements that we're going to be, hopefully ratifying in Parliament. Indonesia is a huge market opportunity for the beef sector. I talked about China a little bit, but of course, I want to make sure we get that $20 million target up higher. But if you look at the bigger picture, it's $10 billion of exports of Canadian beef and pork to markets around the world in 2024 alone. Of course, I want to continue working on that number and expanding that number.
Pour répondre à votre question, il y a eu en importation les 3 dernières années, il y a eu plus
To
de
answer your question, in the last 3 years, for 18 million were imported, and the exports were such that it was not a good deal for us. Now, I'm a businessman, and an agreement has to be well negotiated, but it seems that the foundation here, like when you build a house, it's the basement has got to be concrete, but our basement here for this deal is made of cardboard. So my question is simple. What are you going to do to regulate this current agreement and manage the non-tariff barriers? Because we cannot make certain exports to the UK because of those non-tariff barriers.
CPTPP and what it will provide to us in terms of once the UK, has accession to the CPTPP is what it provides us. It provides us with enforceable disciplines on non-tariff barriers. It provides us an avenue of having those conversations. It provides binding provisions in the CPTPP to have those conversations. And so I think it's important when you look at what the CPTPP provides us to do, what we don't have currently right now, it's an area of opportunity that we'll continue to focus on.
Thank you very much. Mr.
La présidente, merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Minister, for being here with us this morning. We're very pleased to see you. Now, in the past, I worked in financing for companies. I worked in the banking sector for the Chamber of Commerce in Quebec City over 20 years. And we all remember CUSMA. 2 words came up a lot, so much that we joked about it: predictability and unpredictability. And I know that in the past, predictability for businesses, for economic development is essential. However, today, companies are living in a world where unpredictability has become the norm, and companies have to adapt, again, because of the current geopolitical situation. So, again, this is the new normal. So this new agreement, the CPTPP, was between Canada and 10 other countries. So what I'd like to know, Mr. Minister, is how key sectors in Quebec, such as aerospace, agri-food, advanced manufacturing, aluminum, forestry, and value-added wood products and clean technology, how are all these sectors going to benefit from this agreement, which is to be built on clear rules?
And Madam Chair, through you, I want to thank the member for his excellent work on this committee. what we do around trade is all about the workers on the ground. It's all about the industries, whether it's in Quebec or across Canada. And if you look at, I was just speaking about defense, as you look at nations investing in the defense sector, that presents a lot of opportunities for Canadian aerospace industries. And this is why we want to fight hard to get access to the EU safe mechanism, the procurement mechanisms to allow Canadian companies to bid on procurement opportunities. Beyond the UK, if you look at what we've been doing over the last 8 months, Madam Chair, through you, typically the Government of Canada would sign one agreement a year. We've done 3 in 7 months. Indonesia, Ecuador, signing an investment agreement with the UAE. This year, we're going to be moving fast on ASEAN, on Philippines, on Thailand, on India, on Mercosur. And so the goal here is to make sure that we're continuing to open doors for Canadian businesses, for Canadian workers, many in Quebec. Of course, clean tech, we punch way above our weight in the clean tech space. We're considered top 5 in the world in terms of clean tech technology, and so many of my delegations, as Mr. Lavoie would know, would involve clean tech companies from Quebec, from across Canada, because there's an area of opportunity there as the world moves forward to fight climate change, to address environmental concerns. We have the technology in this country, and we'll continue building on that. If you look at what we're doing around the Major Projects Office, the low-carbon LNG that we have coming out of the ground. We have 7 projects in development, and this trade and investments go hand in hand to me. That's part of my responsibility is to attract investments into this country, and so we've gotten some big wins. Malaysia Petronas just signed a 20-year deal for Canadian LNG. If you look at what we're doing around energy and battery storage, more cleaner sources of energy, there's areas of opportunity there. These are discussions that I had in China in terms of energy storage and wind technology. And so I think we have a lot to be proud of, and we have a lot to showcase. And so this is part of the reason for trade delegations to come out with me, so they can directly showcase their world-class products.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Vous avez parlé du Québec. Effectivement, on
Thank you,
regarde
Mr. Minister. You talked about Quebec, and in Quebec, based on the polls, there's an appetite for exports. And here in North America, and in my riding, we have the Port of Quebec City, and historically, this port has always contributed with the Maritimes to ship our exports towards Europe, and we want to do our share in future. So how was the objective set to double exports towards Europe from Quebec and Canada?
We've set a target of doubling non-U.S. exports to the tune of $300 billion by 2035. And the European markets, the Indo-Pacific markets, play a big role there. And so if you look at the terminal in Quebec, in Montreal, in the Major Projects Office, it was just recently approved to expand their port and the Port of Montreal. That will present a lot of opportunities. Now, why is that important? If you look at demand and supply around shipping rates, we want to make sure that we're continuing to diversify, but we also need to add capacity at our ports. Because if you don't add capacity at the ports, shipping rates will go up. It'll discourage diversification. And so that's why we have a $5 billion trade corridor fund to help with that, to help build more railways capacity, inland terminals, ports, more space at the airport cargo facilities. This is crucial to our diversification strategy. And so coming back to everything we're doing, it's about the workers on the ground. It comes back to opportunities for Canadians, and we need to continue building up that capacity through trade, through infrastructure, but of course encouraging businesses to get out to new markets around the world.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chambers, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, welcome back to committee. It's a pleasure to have you as always. Just so I'm clear, all the members of the CPTPP had to agree to allowing the UK to join the agreement. Is that correct?
Yes, it's consensus-based.
Right. So, in my estimation, or what we've heard today, Canada's beef and pork producers still have non-tariff barriers to trade in place today after real government has allowed this, as they did before. Is that correct?
What I would say on beef access to the CPTPP, if you're talking about the whole trading bloc, the 12 members, if you look at since we signed it, beef exports to the CPTPP markets have increased by 122%. And so it's helping the beef exporters in Canada, this trading bloc, for sure.
Right, but specifically as it relates to the UK, the trade disputes or the non-tariff barriers
that the UK has imposed on Canadian producers are still in place today as they were 2 weeks ago?
We're working through that. As I said earlier, it's about how the carcasses are washed. There's a couple of other things that we're having ongoing discussions around. But to me, I look at the bigger picture, and you look at beef and pork exports to the tune of $10 billion. Of course, this market's important to me, but talking to the Cattle Association directly is Indonesia presents a lot more opportunity than maybe another market. But thank you for opening markets, but please continue resolving many of our outstanding irritants, and we'll continue working on that.
I mean, well, the committee will hear from the cattle producers. I'm sure will give us their view. You also mentioned the pension issue. I'm encouraged you've raised this with your UK counterparts.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I've got emails in my constituency office from many of the pensioners in Canada, and so this is an ongoing conversation. But I would like to say is pension issues have never been tied to any of our trade agreements, and likely never will be. But it's a conversation we'll continue to have with the government in the UK. You can't tie it to that because it has nothing to do with the trade agreements.
But my impression is that if Canada is allowing something to happen that the UK absolutely needs in order to join the agreement, surely we should get something, or potentially have an opportunity to get something, a commitment, something a little bit more concrete than to having more discussions about some of these issues that we have outstanding. I mean, the UK pensioners, my understanding is, that can be solved with about £12 million, according to them, which isn't a really big ask. Like, the Prime Minister has a very close personal relationship with Prime Minister Starmer. That's no secret. How come we're giving the UK something but not getting something in return?
Well, I would say it's a win-win for both Canada and the UK in terms of what the CPTPP gives us access to, and I can give you some examples of what it means for Canada. But coming back to the pensioners here in Canada that have constantly brought up the UK's provisions around their own pensions, this is a conversation that I'll continue to have. It's important to me, and this is why I've raised it with my counterpart multiple times, and I think I'll continue to engage in that matter. But I think it's very important for those watching that a pension issue should not be tied to trade agreements.
No, I take that point, Minister. I just think when we have the opportunity, when Canada has leverage, of which we, there's all this talk about leverage around the world, but when Canada does have leverage with another country and they need something from us, I think, it's fair to ask or assume that the government would use that leverage in a way that extracts a benefit for either our producers here or, as we mentioned, the pensioners of Canadian citizens. I'm encouraged to hear that you're raising these issues. My understanding is your predecessor did not raise these issues, and so that's important to me. And I think I have about a minute left. Madam Chair. Well, look, I'll perhaps leave you with a following view. I don't agree with a lot of what your government does. I don't agree with a lot of how your government spends its money. I certainly don't agree with some of the decisions they make on a regular basis. We have a differing opinion on the China question, of course, and getting closer to the CCP. But I'll leave you with a commitment that I'll make personally. We believe in free trade. I believe in free trade. We need to expand our trading relationships. I think this committee has done some good work. It will stand to do some good work. We remain at your service in order to help the government expand its trading relationships. We'll hold you accountable along the way, but we would like to work with you in order to ensure that Canadians are getting the best deal that we can when we make these agreements, which is why I'm pushing you to use our leverage when we have it for the benefit of Canadians. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I can just quickly say thank you. This is going to take a Team Canada approach, and I appreciate the collaborative approach from all parties around this table. We're in a time of economic insecurity, especially with our largest trading partner. We need to continue pushing forward, continue to engage with new opportunities, new partners around the world. Coming back to the CPTPP and the UK ascension, there's wins here for our food producers, for our processors, for our sweet corn industry, for service suppliers in veterinary service, construction services, giving them access to more UK procurement opportunities. And so there are definitely wins here in terms of the CPTPP. We'll continue pushing. This is a high-quality trade trading bloc that has a lineup of countries waiting to join it. And Canada's lucky to be a founding member since 2018, and the results speak for themselves. It just in our exports alone increases over 50%. Beef and pork exports up close to the tune of $10 billion. And so we'll continue engaging with all industry and stakeholders to ensure that they're represented at the table. And that's my number one commitment to all of you around this table. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. That ends
Madame la
the
Présidente,
hour.
est-ce que je peux tout simplement faire une demande de document de dépôt?
May I ask that documents be tabled since the positive position with regard to investment state dispute resolution mechanism? Can we get these statistics with regard to the number of defeats versus the number of successes of Canada with regard to this mechanism? Thank you.
Thank you.
Vous dire oui au micro pour que ça soit
Can the
bien.
minister please say yes in the mic so we have that for the record?
My officials will follow up with you.
Okay. All right. Well, Minister, thank you very much. We appreciate it. You covered off with Mr. Chambers' comments. You know how the committee feels, and that we've always worked together, and we will continue to do that. So thank you very much for giving us an hour. We will now switch into having department officials come to the table. The plan for dealing with the C13 will be 2 meetings plus clause by clause. And hopefully we will get this through in the manner that we all want to see that happen. So, Minister Sadu, you can leave and have your department officials come to the table, please, for the next hour. Oh, I got to... Staff and the members, please take your position so that we can continue our meeting.
They don't have any opening statements. They're ready to go into questions and answers.
Right, exactly, right? So we're not doing that.
Well, look at this, new year and new food.
You give us another suggestion. Next is salmon, I think, and then,
Oh yeah, Peter likes to say, he likes the fish, yeah.
okay. Mr. Savard-Tremblay?
Oui, Madame la
point?
Présidente, pourriez-vous nous informer?
Madam Chair, can you let us know what the deadline is to table amendments on this bill?
Mr. Clerk? Tuesday.
Yeah, generally it's asked pour les amendements, on demande 48 heures.
We require 48 hours for amendments just to go over them. And if the committee agrees, I would suggest Tuesday, February 3rd at 9 a.m. to table them.
Today, from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, Evan Lewis, Senior Director, Market Access Secretariat,
pardon.
from the Department of, I'm sorry.
Juste un ajout, on me susurre que
Sorry, I've just been told here that we haven't. Because we haven't heard from all witnesses yet, perhaps that deadline might be premature.
Well, if the idea is to have the other meeting on Tuesday and go into clause by clause on the Thursday, which is February the 5th, the clerk would need any suggested amendments in by the Tuesday so that they would have time to do whatever translation and work on those amendments, is my understanding.
qu'il faudrait quand même
Well, it doesn't really make sense because we will not have heard all the witnesses, some of whom might make very good suggestions of amendments which we may not have thought of otherwise. So what point is it to hear witnesses if the testimony will not help us craft amendments?
Mr. Clerk?
You could potentially move it a bit later in the day, if you'd like.
Suggestion that we move it till the end of the day on the Tuesday, following Tuesday's meeting.
Donc, ce qui nous
Well, that would give us a certain amount of time to reflect on what we will have heard. So the end of the day would be what time?
4 p.m.?
ça fonctionne aussi.
What about the next morning? 4 hours, that's not much because the meeting ends at 1 p.m. Then we have a 1 hour followed by question period, and then maybe no more than half an hour to develop amendments. That's not very long.
Déjà mieux.
All right. Okay.
Well, that's better.
Important your help. All right. I will continue on from the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Alexil Dijsselbel. excuse me for not pronouncing your name properly, Director, Trade Negotiations Division, and Matthew Smith, Chief Agricultural Negotiator. And from Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, of course, we have Mary Catherine Spears, Director General, Trade Negotiations Bureau, again with us. Thank you all very much for being here. I will, there's no opening remarks. I will open the floor for questions. Mr. Mantle, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our department officials for being here. What happens to the trade continuity agreement now?
So the Canada-UK Trade Continuity Agreement continues to exist with the CPTPP, and of course, as noted, under the Canada-UK Trade Continuity Agreement, it's already fully enforced, and we have 99% of our trade in goods is tariff-free under that agreement, and then the CPTPP adds additional opportunities, which are a factor of the CPTPP as a multilateral agreement with 12 partners.
So do I understand from your response that it is the department's intention, the government's intention, that the trade continuity agreement will continue indefinitely, side by side, after the UK's ascension to the CPTPP?
Yes, that's correct.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I want to ask a question about, and this is primarily for my friends at Global Affairs, about what I have perceived to be a culture of secrecy at Global Affairs. And I don't take this to comment directly at you, but rather with the department more generally. When we have engaged in trade negotiations, there is no public process that is permitted. There are comments that are received, oftentimes by the government, and then curated reports are issued sometimes about what the government heard. But there's no transparency about what industries may say to the government or written comments that may be provided to the government. For example, with our ongoing discussions with the United States, which I understand are not happening at the moment, but the government engaged in a consultation, and I use that in quotations because it's not much of a consultation, and the chief trade negotiator came here and basically told the committee to pound sand when we asked for those comments in writing, and we had to issue a production order for that. Contrast that with the United States, where when they conduct a negotiation, they have a legislative process, so the USTR is a public process. They hold public hearings. I could go on their website today and download any submission that was made as part of those processes. So why is it that Global Affairs' position, default position, seems to be one of secrecy rather than transparency?
So as an official, I will respond just to note a bit about the processes that we do undertake with respect to public consultations. When we pursue trade agreements and negotiations, they are informed by a robust and ongoing consultation process that we undertake. We undertake public consultations with all Canadians. We also have ongoing engagement with different sectoral groups, with provincial and territorial governments, with Indigenous partners, and maintain an ongoing dialogue with members of the public. We are available to answer questions. We have open mailboxes where questions can be submitted at any time. And we do continue to be informed by the ongoing interests of Canadians and reflect that in our approach to trade negotiations.
Ms. Spears, in fairness, the question is not whether the government is open to receiving comment. I suspect it is and always will be. The question is whether the process in which it receives that comment is open to the public, so that the public and other members of the public or industry groups or indeed parliamentarians can see that feedback and draw their own conclusions about what industry or Canadians feel about these negotiations. That's not currently the case. I do not have access to those submissions that you just mentioned. If you receive comments about the CPTPP or the UK's ascension, I don't have those. I wouldn't even know they've been made because it's not a public process. And so do you see any problem with that process, and is the department willing to make changes so that its process is more transparent and so that, for example, parliamentarians would have access to submissions made by industry or Canadians on these trade negotiations?
I'll just say that as a department, we're committed to working collaboratively with Parliament and with committees, and to supporting the ongoing studies of the committees on these different agreements, including through our appearance today and other committee appearances. And we continue to respond to requests and to seek to work collaboratively.
Thank you for that. I guess then maybe I could ask, in that spirit of collaboration, would you agree to provide the committee any submission you've received by Canadians or industries with respect to the UK's accession to the CPTPP? Would you provide that to the committee?
So that's not been our practice, but I will have to revert with my colleagues.
So you're not giving an answer? You're saying maybe? I just want to be clear on what your answer is here.
I will be following up internally on that request.
So despite suggesting that you want to work collaboratively, you cannot agree to provide the public submissions that the government has had. You see my concern here? This is why it's a culture, this is why there's a concern with the culture of default secrecy. Anything you want to add?
I will be following up.
Merci, merci, Madame la.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to the witnesses for being here today. We appreciate it. Well, in preparing for today's meeting, I learned that Great Britain is the biggest investor after the U.S. and the Netherlands. So how does bringing Great Britain on board bring more investments to Canada? What's the point? We already have $100 million. Is it to double or triple that amount? So explain the rationale to us.
Si vous me permettez de répondre en
If I may, I'd like to respond in English. But I'm very pleased to take your answers and your questions in French.
CPTPP continues to foster a strong environment to encourage additional investment and to provide the protections and the promotion of that investment, including by offering certainty, transparency, and protection for Canadian investments abroad, and likewise for UK investors who will be afforded the same benefits for investments that they make in Canada. The intent of this is to enable Canadian businesses to invest and do business more, and while continuing to promote Canada as a very attractive destination for UK investment in Canada. Given that we already have a very strong bilateral investment relationship with the UK, it's hoped that the CPTPP as a multilateral agreement will also offer more opportunities for investment in the context of the access that this brings to the CPTPP market and to CPTPP supply chains through the inclusion of the UK in this agreement.
Merci. Merci pour votre réponse.
Thank you for that answer. Will the government help companies take advantage of this? And if so, how is the government going to support our businesses?
So the CPTPP is, of course, already in force with existing membership. And as the minister noted earlier, it has been very beneficial for Canadian businesses. And we have significantly grown our trade relationship with partners under the CPTPP. Similarly, as the UK's accession is completed, we will be able to promote these opportunities and the additional opportunities that this brings to Canadian business. And we'll continue to be able to leverage that through the existing supports that we offer to Canadian business, through the Trade Commissioner Service, as well as the Minister noted, through specific programs which are designed to foster new opportunities for SME exporters to take advantage of trade opportunities and to make better use of our trade agreements, as well as through ongoing efforts to ensure that Canadian companies across the country are aware of the opportunities that our trade agreements offer and that they are able to take advantage of those opportunities to expand their trade with partners in CPTPP and in other markets.
Merci.
Thank you. Are there any sectors or regions in the country which will benefit more from the UK joining this trade agreement? Any specific sectors or regions?
As a very comprehensive and high standard agreement should offer opportunities to businesses in a wide range of sectors across the country. And likewise, the CPTPP, growing to include the UK, will continue to expand the CPTPP's benefits to include a very significant additional market, and one that is already a very, very significant trade and investment partner for Canada. As a result, this should offer some new opportunities in a variety of sectors. The CPTPP continues to exist and will build upon the Canada-UK Trade Continuity Agreement. However, it does provide additional opportunities, including in a range of new sectors, including through more liberal rules of origin under the CPTPP, specific opportunities that it will offer in the UK market, as well as integrating a very large services trading partner into the CPTPP so that we have an increased coverage in terms of commitments for our services trade between Canada and the UK.
Merci. On parle beaucoup.
Thank you. There's a lot of talk of diversification. In Quebec, as I said earlier, we are positioning ourselves strategically. We're next to the Maritimes. There's the transport of merchandise. And can you tell the average Canadian what exactly does increased diversification mean if we double our exports to Europe towards the UK under this agreement? Can you provide us concrete examples of what exactly is going to change as compared to today? Can you give examples to the average Canadians so we can see where we're going?
For a few examples of what the UK joining the CPTPP can add to our existing opportunities with the UK. Obviously, this is part and parcel of the network of trade agreements that we do have in force with partners not only in Europe, but also across the Indo-Pacific, as well as in other regions. The CPTPP as an agreement covers virtually all aspects of trade and investment and brings together a very strong group of economies across the Indo-Pacific region. And now, of course, with the UK, brings in another large G7 partner to the agreement and significant additional market opportunities from integrating the UK into that agreement. The intent of including this UK in the CPTPP is also to bring it into that one set of rules and that overall trade environment that we've created through the CPTPP. And it builds upon the existing TCA that we have with the UK. We have FTAs in force with a range of markets. And as I said, we work together as well with our colleagues who work more on the trade promotion side to ensure that we are informing Canadian companies and businesses of the opportunities. We are providing guidance with respect to how they can take advantage of the opportunities and the market opening that these FTAs do offer, and that they can also take advantage and benefit from a range of related supports and facilitation mechanisms that we have, whether it's funding for new exporters to visit trade fairs or explore new markets, as well as the ongoing services that we offer through the Trade Commissioner Service, both in Canada through our regional offices and at our posts abroad, to help facilitate Canadian businesses' ability to take advantage of these trade agreements.
Thank you very much, Ms.
Merci.
Spears. On to
Merci.
Monsieur Savard-Tremblay for 6 minutes, please. Welcome.
Bonjour, merci pour votre...
Yes, hello, and thank you for being here. I'll put the question directly, but I imagine Ms. Spears is going to respond. But to follow up on a question I put to the minister on the non-respect of the official policy when it comes to tabling legislation regarding to trade agreements. Who made that decision? Do you know that? I believe that was a political decision under the parliamentary agenda. But this policy, which is official, it is still in force. Do you find the decision is still relevant? Well, as far as we are concerned, the government always follows the policy rules as they appear black on white. And so you did not make this decision. It was decided on the political side exclusively. Yes. Thank you. Now, I'll come back to the other issues which I raised. First, well, your title is Director General, Trade Negotiations Bureau. So you've been in this role for quite a while. You were part of the negotiations? Yes. So to go to some of the other questions I put to the minister a little earlier. Now, with regard to the investor-state dispute resolution mechanism, is Canada still in support of this mechanism? Yes. I'm just wondering if you have any numbers with you. I had asked this question of the minister. Would you have the numbers or statistics with regard to how many times Canada lost and how many times it won under this mechanism, as well as how much it costs to... Well, I can share some numbers with you. I don't have all of them with me. Perhaps, can you table with the committee those numbers that you don't have with you now? Yes. Now, what Canada paid in damages following some dispute resolutions, we paid about $208 million for every case. And this was all to U.S. investors, which represents 5% of all damages received by Canadian investors under this mechanism. So this is what we paid. Because beyond what we paid, what did it cost to fight under this mechanism, legal fees, etc.? Do you have that amount? No, I don't, but I'll get back to you on that. And then what about the number of successes and failures? I'll look into that and follow up. Do you remember if we had more successes or failures? I don't remember that. Can I know why Canada supported Great Britain's accession to this agreement? $208 million is a lot of money. Only, I said that jokingly, but I know how I would have spent that amount of money. So I really don't understand the relevance of this mechanism, which undermines the legitimate positions of Canada, of the country. So how is that still relevant? If I may, I'll respond in English. I'm sorry. No worries.
Of the CPTPP, ISDS is part of the investment chapter of the CPTPP. In this case, the UK was acceding to an existing agreement, and in this context, we undertook a conformity review of the UK with the CPTPP's rules, and the UK accepted the investment chapter as it was previously agreed and as it is in force for the CPTPP. As a result, it does contain ISDS provisions, and ISDS has overall been an overall net benefit to Canada and to Canadian investors abroad. So we always take great care to ensure that our investment agreements include strong safeguards and that we continue to preserve the right of governments to regulate in the public interest.
You're saying that it was a net advantage or benefit, and I asked for numbers. You say you didn't have them? Well, I don't have the number of successes and failures. Well, if it's a net advantage, there has to be a clear number of victories for Canada. Well, the damages that we paid in cases we lost, $208 million. Yes. However, Canadian investors have also won some of their cases in the amount of $4.3 billion. so Canadian investors receive that? Well, it's hard to compare the money spent by the state for investors and money taken from investors and given to other states. I don't follow the math.
Too far over to get an answer back. Maybe you can
Prochain tour,
supply
je
that
répéterai la question.
information to the member following it. Mr. Gurlow, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Bonjour.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Smith, I believe you're chief negotiator for the agricultural sector. Well, that's quite a challenge today. I come from the Beauce region. It's a farming region. It's a beautiful area. And under these massive trade agreements, the devil is in the details. Beef and pork producers are really disappointed with the last agreement. Can you tell us more about that and more about non-tariff barriers? Can you repeat the last part? Well, details are important in these trade agreements. The devil is in the details, as you know. Our beef and pork producers cannot export to the UK. They're upset about that. And can you tell us more about that? Thank you for the question. We have a lot of interaction with those two sectors, beef and pork. We've already had this discussion during the first hour of this meeting. The vast majority of goods and products don't face any tariff, non-tariff barriers. However, some do remain, and beef and pork producers always bring that up with us, with me, with the department. And honestly, we're really disappointed with the way our quality products are being treated by the UK. There are obstacles. The minister already said that we are in discussion with the UK to gain a greater market share for our beef and pork producers. There are two areas now where we can advance our discussions. And under the framework of the agreement, which remains in place, and with the start of the session with the UK government, we think there is an opportunity for us to show that we deserve to access that market more. Well, we're not happy with the result at this point. We import for tens of millions of dollars, but in those sectors, we don't export anything to the UK. Is this one of your objectives, to access the UK market? Would that be the first priority you would like to achieve in these negotiations? Well, there's no conversation between the government of Canada and the government of the UK where we do not raise this issue. And we expect to gain a better access to the UK market. And we know there has been no progress in past years. I understand the situation, and the government is going to keep on raising this issue in discussions. When you negotiate, again, these are massive agreements, you must have objectives going in. And in the agricultural sector, what are your current objectives? Well, negotiations were held, and we reached a trade continuity agreement with the UK after Brexit, where 99% of our exports can go into the UK tariff and barrier free. However, some barriers remain. There are a few more rules, and there's a bit more rigor under the CPTPP. And we are going to use the structures of each of these agreements to push forward our discussions. And perhaps my colleague from the CIIT can contribute to this discussion and enlighten you. Do you sometimes look back and look at results of previous negotiations. So what happens when you can't reach the goals that you've set for yourself? How does that work? Well, one of the issues raised by the Canadian government has to do with how the rules governing beef imports are applied in the UK. So it's expensive. We have a very high quality product which is in demand around the world, including countries which are signatory to the CPTPP. And obviously, we're going to sell to those who are willing to pay the most for our products. But in Great Britain, it's less attractive because the costs are higher. It's not that the issue was not raised. The UK has been very clear that the changes we are asking for would so our arguments are science-based, and the UK was not recognizing these arguments when it came to the quality of our products. And in the US, they also have similar concerns as the UK when it comes to market access for these products.
Please, 4 or 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and welcome. Welcome. And thank you for being here on such short notice. Not only the minister was able to attend, but you too, you had to prepare for this meeting. So again, thank you. A little earlier, Ms. Spears, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, you said that there were several opportunities to promote to give more support to our businesses. I've been in politics for a while, and when you're in business, you have to look for opportunities. A little earlier, you talked about trade opportunities and promoting Canadian products and services. Are you encouraging female entrepreneurs to join our trade delegations? Because I've met a few female entrepreneurs in Quebec, and they said that a trade delegation, if you want to connect on the ground elsewhere, you don't have to, you can't just go once. You have to keep on going back to that country and build a relationship to get things going. Thank you for the question. From the point of view of promoting our exports and creating opportunities for Canadians in markets abroad, as I said, there are several pathways we have to inform our entrepreneurs of opportunities under trade agreements. We also have promotion programs, we have our trade delegates, and in Canada, we are disseminating more information to help Canadian businesses export, and we are building them up for success. Yes, as you said, sometimes it takes a while to establish a relationship, to create a connection with potential clients or investors in other markets. So one pathway is through our trade missions. We've already had trade missions exclusively for female entrepreneurs, but we're also following a pathway through our trade missions to create greater access for small and medium-sized businesses. We are looking for and developing programs to put our businesses in contact with businesses abroad in their specific sector, and we're trying to create opportunities in diverse markets. And when it comes to female entrepreneurs, again, there are these two pathways. One is putting them in touch with other businesses and groups that are led by women. and we are also working on markets of interest. So there are several pathways, and so this is how our female entrepreneurs can develop opportunities in diverse markets. Thank you. I was hoping to hear more about what's happening on the ground because we met with representatives from the BDC, which has a budget for female entrepreneurs. And not only the BDC will help female entrepreneurs, the BDC helps all kinds of businesses. Well, our trade delegates manage programs, some of which target female entrepreneurs to encourage them to look for opportunities abroad and to show them how that can be done. Thank you. A little earlier, you had a discussion with my colleague across the way. You said that, for instance, if an entrepreneur wants to ask specific questions on opportunities under the CPTPP, when I was starting in this job, it was only the TPP. Now it's the CPTPP. But say an entrepreneur is looking for opportunities, what website can this entrepreneur turn to? Well, I don't have these specific links here. We can share them later, but on our department's webpage, we have information, and we also have the services provided by our trade delegates. We also have email addresses if entrepreneurs want to reach out, and if they have specific questions with regard to our various trade agreements. Already, I had more questions.
I've been a little bit more flexible, 10 or 15 seconds more. I just have to make sure everybody gets the opportunity. Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 2.5 minutes, please.
Reprenons dans ce cas-là.
Well, let's pick up where we left off a little earlier. So I was saying I don't really understand the way you calculate the net benefits of these agreements. So Canadian businesses, the private sector, you said have received more in damages than what was paid out to foreign businesses. But in one case, we're talking about taxpayers' money. In fact, in both cases, we're talking about taxpayers' money, but at the end of the day, that number hides a lot of data. When you talk about net benefits, we would need the context. And we would need to know what the entirety of the costs are to Canada, because if you only quote the number that we had to pay in damages, well, there are other costs involved, such as the costs of litigation and other costs related to certain projects like a GNL in the Saguenay. In some cases, the parties ultimately agree, but sometimes deals fall through because politicians bow out. So before talking about a net benefit to Canadians, shouldn't you do the math?
Je vais pas passer de commentaires.
I did understand. I'm not going to comment on the method, but I do have further information to share. So in all of our trade agreements, we have won 21 times, and we've lost 10. And those 10 cases we lost originally were under CUSMA, the original CUSMA. So it was investment in the United States. So with respect to costs of the wins and the losses, Canadian investors who decided to use those mechanisms won $4.3 billion. And for the losses, or those that were eventually settled, $208 million was paid out. Now, with respect to costs for lawyers and processing of these cases. That happens within the department at our legal branch. We call it the Trade Law Bureau. So that is done in-house. And if there is a win by Canada, we also attempt to have our costs recovered. And I'm trying to recall the correct terminology, but we get the defendant who has lost to recover, to assist us in recovering the costs.
Please.
Thank you. Thank you for appearing at committee. Thank you for the work you do on behalf of Canadians to expand our relationships and get our goods to more markets. Just wondering if you could let me understand or educate me a bit more on the process with respect to our concerns that producers have raised with the non-tariff barriers that the UK has imposed on beef and pork, as an example. How do we resolve those issues? And do you worry that the UK will bring some of that thinking into the CPTPP agreement such that it impacts the way other countries view Canadian agriculture products?
Well, I'm happy to start with a response there, and if my colleagues want to add, I'll invite them to. I think that there's two parts to the question I heard, Madam Chair. One, some of the work that's happening to continue to advance those and resolve those non-tariff barriers that our agriculture exporters face. And so for that, we are using every opportunity we have to engage with the UK government. Some of that is done regularly through our people on the ground at the High Commission there, at the level of government representatives that visit and engage with the UK. But also we have structures in place to specifically talk about the type of regulatory issues we face in the sanitary, phytosanitary space. And we have a committee structure where we are able to get dedicated access to the type of officials that would be responsible for the regulatory policies in question in the UK. That's one of the advantages of having a live free trade agreement with another partner government like the Continuity Agreement. But then also about the impact, and maybe I'll ask my colleague from the Food Inspection Agency to say a bit about the committee work, but on the impact that the UK would have on the agreement. I think there are a number of other partners to it. Everybody will be looking at, for example, which countries will exceed in the future and what standard will we hold those countries to. The UK is now going to be a part of that group in looking at others, absolutely. But it's our intention in Canada to make sure that we're applying the very high standard we expect of any country that would come into that agreement with regard to how they let our products into their market and how they handle them. It's a big consideration when we look at the accession of further countries to it. I don't know if Evan?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm happy to supplement that with your indulgence. We do have, so my team in the CFIA does a number of things relevant in this space. One is we support the broader interdepartmental and government effort to negotiate free trade agreements, and specifically chapters on sanitary and phytosanitary measures. And we also, in parallel to that, work on addressing and resolving the day-to-day market access barriers that are there with various partners, whether we have a free trade agreement with them or not. In that vein, my team, and actually I represent Canada on a number of the committees that are established under FTAs, including the Committee on Sanitary and Phytosanitary Measures with the UK that is in place under our bilateral trade continuity agreement, as well as representing Canada in the Committee on Sanitary and Phytosanitary Measures under the CPTPP. And so we use our bilateral committee as well as just regular day-to-day interaction with our counterparts in the UK to advance resolution on a number of the specific issues that have been mentioned here today that we are well aware of that remain problematic for the pork and beef, for example.
Thank you. I'm just going to jump in because I want to
absolutely
keep to the chair's time here with about 30, not even 30 seconds left. Is it the testimony that there are current discussions underway with UK about these non-tariff, like there are official negotiations and discussions underway with the UK about these non-tariff barriers?
Yes.
The final question.
Yes.
If this does not get resolved, how long before we can give the producers some comfort that there is a path to a resolution here? Like, is this a years-long thing or a months thing?
It depends highly on the nature of the issue. We're working very closely with the Cattle Association, for example, on the issue of carcass washes. The ball is in actually industry's court to make the next steps with respect to UK approval there. With trichinella for pork, for example, that's another issue that's well underway. We will see when that is able to be resolved based on sound science.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Fonseca.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our officials for being here with us today. We set a goal of increasing our exports by 50% by 2024 or 2025. We've reached them in 2024 outside of the United States, so exports outside of the U.S. export. And now we've set this lofty goal of doubling that, so increasing by 100%, so about $300 billion over the next decade of exports outside of those exported to the United States. Can you tell me how this accession of the UK to the CPTPP, how that will factor in to achieving those numbers?
Thank you. So I think the CPTPP, as one of our largest trade agreements, already plays a very important role in how we can continue to diversify and grow our exports and our trade with new markets. And I'll just quote a couple of stats that I believe Minister Sidhu already noted earlier, which is that since the CPTPP entered into force for Canada in 2018, we've increased our trade between Canada and CPTPP partners up to $135.4 billion, which is a net increase of 38.3% since 2018. We've reached a record high of $37.5 billion of exports of merchandise to CPTPP partners. Including the UK and the CPTPP will only encourage this to grow. The UK is a very significant market. 67 million consumers. We already have a robust trade and investment relationship. And as the UK joins the CPTPP, we'll just expand that one agreement further. And of course, it's only one of our number of trade agreements, but there's markets that we are seeking to expand in, and these are new and expanding markets of opportunity for us in the CPTPP. And it builds on to the existing agreements that we also have, of course, with the EU, as well as our other network of FTAs.
So what you're saying is with the UK accession into the CPTPP, there's a multiplier effect. So businesses that now are already doing trade, Canadian businesses with the UK, as the UK now increases its trade within the CPTPP, they will in turn do more business and provide more opportunities. Is that
I think that's exactly it. And we're integrating the UK into this very high standard, very robust market in the CPTPP. So it just helps us to grow the overall opportunities in that way.
I just want to go down to a micro level. In my writing, I was approached by a construction company that is interested in doing some building overseas with Canadian forestry products. Knowing full well how that industry, the forest sector industry, is being hard hit by the tariffs from the U.S., how will this be an opportunity also with the UK? But beyond the UK, how can we help companies like the one, like I said, that wants to take this opportunity and help Canadian businesses? They're in construction and they want to construct with Canadian lumber in other parts of the world. How can you help?
So I'm not going to speak specifically to CPTPP provisions, but more broadly, we are working with a number of partners and markets around the world to establish and to expand the wood building standards and to continue to build and offer more opportunities to demonstrate how wood can be used in construction. I think this is one important avenue where Canadian technology and our skill and some of the products and the technologies that we've developed with respect to wood construction can be better adopted and understood in new markets, and that in turn creates those opportunities for the sector to export to those new markets.
So, but when you have a company in Canada that's ready to go, they want to export, they want to use those materials and build in another place, how does your department help them? I did send them to, I'll tell you, to our Trade Commissioner services, but it didn't seem that was the right avenue. So what should I have done, or where can we get help for a company like this that's looking to help our country?
So I'll be very honest. I mean, I work in international trade, so we're really looking at trade policies and rules. And I think, as I noted, one of the key factors that we are seeking to develop with partners in different markets on wood is, for example, construction standards and understanding and having a recognition of the safety and the nature of those wood construction standards. That is definitely outside my area of expertise in trade, but I believe our Department of Natural Resources does lead on some of those MOUs and other work that we are doing, as well as some of the sector organizations.
And just one last question on branding. Madame Lapointe brought up the branding. Canada's got such a strong brand, but we're not really marketing it as well as I think we could around the world. So what, again, from your end, what are you doing on that brand, showing the quality products that Canada is able to produce and to export, and knowing full well, and with the trade agreements that we have?
So I'll come to it from my perspective of trade agreements, which is very much about opening those markets and creating those opportunities. And then, of course, within Global Affairs Canada, we work very closely with colleagues on the trade promotion side with the Trade Commissioner Service. And I'd say there's a variety of tools that are used. It can be the trade agreements, the trade missions, where we take sectors and showcase Canadian expertise in a given sector in a market of opportunity. We bring businesses directly together in that context, so business-to-business interaction. We also work through trade shows and other sectoral opportunities. It depends a little bit on the sector where the best approach is potentially to take. And of course, we leverage our network of trade commissioners at our posts abroad who are there to develop that local knowledge and to be able to bring that back and help Canadian companies and Canadian sectors to determine where their opportunities are and how they can seek to advance those opportunities and showcase Canadian capacity and Canadian products in those markets.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Everyone has had an opportunity. If there's nothing earth-shattering that someone has to ask, or else actually we will adjourn the meeting and then members can actually...
Avant l'ajournement, c'est pas pour nos témoins, je dirais.
Just before adjournment, this isn't a question to the witnesses, but I'd like to know whether the chair could take on a job. Normally we have to go through legal. This is interpretation. Are you able to hear interpretation?
Donner les délais, parce que là,
I will start again. Thank you. So we have a very short timeline. Thank you for adding a couple extra hours, but we don't have much time between the end of testimony and tabling our amendments to the bill. Given the tight timeline, I assume that the law branch might be inundated with our requests, because normally we go through legal before tabling the amendments to make sure they're in order. So could the chair or could the committee notify legal services that there may be many proposals landing between 1 p.m. and 6 p.m., which is our deadline on Tuesday?
It's a good suggestion. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Move adjournment.